What's up, guys? You know my favorite part of the day is morning coffee, which makes my second favorite part of the day afternoon coffee. Today we are making the Siphon filter. This little baby I actually haven't used in years because it's somewhat difficult to clean, but it looks really cool and really fun. Good party trick, if you will. And I thought you guys might want to see a little something different too. So let's make some coffee. Alright, so this is the bottom portion of our siphon, and this is our top. This little hook down here holds the filter in place. And we also have a lid for towards the very end. I've got 37.5 grams of coffee here. This is the Suprema Crema blend. It's their espresso blend. It's a mix of Brazilian coffee, which lends the sort of typical dark chocolatey, nutty, roasty flavors, which is his like house coffee. And then also the Ethiopian bean that he roasts, which is typically, so just looking at these, let's have a pause in siphon learning. Just looking at these beans, I don't know how well it'll show up on camera, but these two are the Ethiopian, and you can tell because they're smaller and lighter roasted. Typically, African coffees end up getting roasted lighter for more of the origin characteristics, which tend to have a lot more fruity, floral, juicy, almost tea-like qualities. Whereas this is the larger, darker roasted Brazilian bean in the back, and again, that typically is roasted to a little darker of a flavor. So those two characteristics together, this one's called a pea berry because it's in. Anyways, that's another thing. So I'm going to grind this on medium. We're going to use 37.5 grams of coffee beans. We're going to use 500 grams of water, and that will be our ratio. So we'll be right back after I've ground because that thing is loud. There we have it. That's our ground coffee. Incredibly aromatic. I can kind of hear the hot water, so we're going to start by adding 500 grams of hot water, tare it of course, to our siphon. So typically, you would hear a brew ratio talked about in terms of grams per liter. So in this case, it's a 75 gram per liter method for this brewing process. That said, I cut that in half, and that's how we got to the number 37.5 and 500. You typically would figure that out based on how much coffee you want. And please get a digital scale. It'll make all your coffee making much more consistent and delicious, not just with the siphon. Not only that, is they're not that expensive. It's something, it's worth it if you if you really want to take your coffee seriously. I've said for years that you can have a bad day that starts with good coffee, but you'll never have a good day that starts with bad coffee. So let's make sure we have some really good coffee out of this. So I can see some bubbles starting to form. It's coming back up to a boil again. The premise of this method is that, so it's called a siphon. It's also sometimes called a vacuum pot. What happens is the second chamber going on top is cooler. It creates basically a vacuum and pulls the water up because it's cooler. And then we'll add our coffee, give it a stir during its brew time or steeping time. Once it stirs and we cool it off, it'll drain back down. Because the bottom chamber will then have become the colder of the two chambers. I'm gonna get the second piece directly on top. And now I guess we're gonna have to rely on, oh, there it goes. We're gonna have to rely on our GoPro for footage. At this point, now that we have the water up top, I'm going to add my grinds and give them a stir to combine and fully hydrate. We're going to start a timer for 30 seconds. These scales are nice because they also have timer functions on them. And as you can see on the GoPro footage, the top layer is the little crust right here. The grinds, obviously, but on top of that, even more, maybe I can get a view with this camera, has that crema look that you would expect in an espresso. That's because you have fresh beans. Freshly roasted coffee. Oh, I missed that 30-second mark. I'm stirring the crust, and I'm going to wait another 30 seconds. And anyways, the CO2 that gets trapped in the coffee through the roasting process, when it's ground and brewed, gets turned into that crema. So I'm going to stop the turn off the heat. I stopped my timer because we don't need that anymore. It's been another 30 seconds. And we're going to try and quickly turn this to a slow-mo. And there we can see our coffee making its final descent into our chamber. So there it is. Just that easy. And kind of fun to watch too. We'll make sure that cools down completely before we try and clean it. And I've got a mug to pour a little into. And this is going to be too hot to really enjoy right away. As with most good coffees, you want to let it cool down a significant amount, maybe 5 minutes or so. When it's too hot, it sort of burns your mouth and you can't taste any of the flavors in it anyways. When you let it cool down slightly, then you have a chance to taste some of those chocolate notes that you would find in that Brazilian bean, some of the floral notes that you would expect out of the Ethiopian portion of that roast. So I'm going to let this chill down a little bit, and then we'll catch you later. Have a good one, guys. Thanks.